You care about your organization's health. So do we. That's why we created the NCAR KIPI Dashboard, a diagnostic tool that shows your organization's performance on a variety of financial and operating metrics relative to other organizations like yours nationally. A KIPI, or Key Intangible Performance Indicator, is the mojo that sets a high-performing arts organization apart from others. We all know how important of an influence intangible aspects like good decision-making, artistic quality, expertise, reputation, relationships, and the quality of the workforce all are on an organization's performance. By using a statistical technique that we call high-performance frontier analysis, we can tell how much these intangibles play a role in setting an organization apart from others like it nationally. This is a method that has helped many other industries understand high performance and the best practices that drive it. Let's go through Example Theater Company's dashboard and see what the KIPI scores can help us learn about its performance. Once you log in, you can verify that we have your organization's name, sector, and size correct. If you need us to update this information, please click here to let us know. Below, you'll see the 9 general areas that we measure: contributed revenue, earned revenue, expenses, marketing impact, bottom line, balance sheet, community engagement, program activity, and staffing. Some areas have multiple metrics, or indices, while others have only one. Each dot represents an index, and the color represents the relative health of the index. A red dot indicates your score was 0 to 20 in the latest year, meaning you scored higher than 0% to 20% of organizations like yours nationally. At the other end of the color spectrum, a dark green dot indicates a score of 81 to 100, meaning you scored higher than 81% to 100% of organizations like yours nationally. Light orange dots show where your performance was in the average range. You can click to zoom in on an area. There are some important things to keep in mind about the KIPIs. KIPIs range from 0 to 100, with 100 being the highest outcome an organization can achieve based on a level playing field. Scoring high may indicate that you are achieving your objectives, or you may want a low score on some KIPIs given your priorities. For example, your organization may have free admission and you may operate in a low-income neighborhood. If this is the case, then you may care less about earning high program revenue than an organization in a different operating context. Organizations do not prioritize every performance outcome. We provide a range of indices knowing that different organizations have different priorities given their mission and goals. You decide what's important. And Leslie's KIPIs are not prescriptive. They show where you are. You decide where you want to be. You can find answers to frequently asked questions by clicking on the fact page at the top at any time. Now let's look more closely at Example Theater's contributed revenue KIPIs. The landing page shows a summary of your latest year's scores on all contributed revenue indices. At Example Theater, I see that we score higher than 88% of peer organizations on return on fundraising, or the amount of contributed revenue the organization brings in per dollar spent on fundraising. We score higher than more than 60% of organizations like ours nationally on unrestricted contributions, trustee, individual, and corporate contributions, all relative to expenses. This is great to see since we've been working on developing support in these areas, and it's information that I can celebrate with the board. The above average corporate support is really a nice surprise since an area that we frequently discuss in board meetings. Even though we didn't think we were doing great in this area, it appears that relatively few of our peers are doing better. We're actually well above average, not behind, something to celebrate. Our foundation support is average, and we know that the per capita public funding in our state's low, so government funding score is not too big of a surprise. I'm intrigued, though, by how well we do on return on fundraising, and I want to explore this area more in depth, so I click on it to see the trends. On the left side of the screen, I see that the trend in my KIPI score peaked in 2012, went down in 2013, and has been on the rise in 2014 and 2015. We're heading in the right direction. On the right side of the screen, I can check on what our contributed revenue and fundraising expenses were each year. The site lets me know that to increase my score, I'd have to increase my revenue or reduce my expenses, which makes sense since this is a ratio. I can eyeball the reason behind the bump in our KIPI score in 2012. Our contributed revenue was higher that year while our fundraising expenses were lower. The next year, the same fundraising spend yielded a lower level of contributions. If ever I'm unsure of what we spent, I scroll over the trend dots and the dashboard provides me with our data. If I see we had misentered information, there's a link to correcting it in the facts at the top of the page. I now want to check out trends for other contributed revenue indices. Our trustee contributions KIPI hasn't varied much. I can see here where we reduced the budget in 2012 and 2013 when our ticket sales were down, and we've been building our resources back up since we started implementing our strategic plan. There was a big drop in trustee given in 2013, following a high in 2012 at the end of our capital campaign. But our KIPI score didn't go down too much, but for two reasons. Well, we had lower expenses in 2013, and the KIPIs take into account the fact that we were no longer in a capital campaign in 2013, so the expected level of trustee given was automatically adjusted lower. I'm very happy to see the upward trend in individual giving. Even though we have a lot of room for growth in foundation support, at least we're doing better than we were back in 2011. Our government support KIPI has been fairly flat. Our state funding potential is limited, but we could be more aggressive in applying for federal funding. Between the foundation and government areas, perhaps this is a good moment to explore that additional half-time grant writer position that we've discussed. Let's take a look at earned revenue. We're middle of the pack in terms of earned revenue relative to expenses and our program revenue per attendee. Program revenue accounts for all revenue earned because someone attended, their ticket revenue, what they spent on concessions, parking, etc. All the money earned by the organization because someone walked through the door. Our program revenue per attendee really took a hit in 2012 and again in 2013. Our attendance was down and we got into some deep discounting, and you can see it in our scores. It's good to see that we're building in that area, and we've remained in the national average range with peer organizations. Our relational revenue score is a 61. It was lower in those early years, but I see that we've been steady in an upward trend, and that's good news. While I'm thinking about attendance and engagement, let me check out our marketing impact KIPIs. Our return on marketing, or program revenue per dollar spent on marketing, is average, but our response to marketing, or the number of attendees per dollar spent on marketing, is super low. This would have to mean that we're attracting fewer attendees than our peers nationally, but extracting more earned revenue from them when they come. I see that even though we're doing better on attendance, we're still way below average relative to what we spend on marketing. It costs us a lot more than it should to bring in each person. If I want to see whether we have an attendance problem or a marketing expense problem, I can click here to see how I could increase my score. This tells me that my KIPI on the numerator, attendance, was only a 30, while my marketing expense KIPI was a 61. So our marketing expenses are not far from average for organizations like ours, but we're well below the pack in terms of attendance. The dashboard also tells me what it would take to increase either KIPI by 10 points. Had we attracted 70,610 people rather than 61,272, our attendance KIPI would have been a 40, which would have improved our overall response to marketing efforts KIPI. We have more of a demand problem than we thought. We also touch a much lower percentage of our local community if I look at the community engagement scores. We really need to work on the reach of our in-person community engagement. And I've started talking about what kind of online offerings would be a good fit with our mission and a complement to our live programming. Clearly, this is a big opportunity for us to explore in terms of reaching more people. If I go below, I can see here where NCAR has resources that can help us be more strategic and successful in reaching more people. I can also check out what the average score is for organizations in my sector and of my size nationally, as well as get insights on how my scores determine and what factors from our operations in the local community have an impact on this outcome. The low engagement resonates again in our program activity KIPI for people per offering. Even though our scores are low, this makes sense to me. We added all that new outreach programming starting in 2013 as part of our new strategic plan and in reaction to our dwindling audiences. Our scores were very low before these programs took hold, but it appears that they're getting traction and driving our KIPIs back towards the average. We haven't considered a visitor to staff ratio before. We added back staff in 2012 after cuts during the recession and didn't really consider it in relation to whether the hiring would result in us attracting more people. Definitely something to consider moving forward, especially since we have more staff per visitor than our peers. This is an area where we'll probably want to shoot for average. Too high of a score may mean that we're pushing our staff members' capacity to their limits. Now let's look at expenses. Investment in programming. I can see that we're in the middle of the pack for the percentage of budget we invest directly in programs relative to budget, but we spend a little bit less than average actually on program personnel compensation relative to budget. I would have expected us to be average on both. Perhaps this is something we should open a discussion about, maybe spending a little bit less on physical production materials and a little more on artistic compensation. And what about that bottom line? I can't wait to share with the board how well we're doing relative to our peers in managing the bottom line. We've worked really hard to rebuild the budget and revenue in a responsible way since hitting those rough patches in 2011 and 2012. No matter how the bottom line's calculated in subsequent years, operating revenue alone or all unrestricted funds, with and without depreciation included, we've got something to celebrate. The dashboard also will allow me to contextualize with the board and funders the working capital issues we had in 2011 and 2012 under the balance sheet area. Evidently, we weren't the only ones cash-strapped at that time, since our KIPI scores were still high even though our working capital, well, it was what it was. We've come out of that crisis more stable, and these KIPIs help us tell that story. In the end, it appears our story is that we're doing great relative to the field on contributed revenue, and managing both our bottom line and balance sheet relatively well. We're at national averages for organizations like ours on earned revenue indices. Where we fall short is on response to our programming. Our subscribers stick with us, but we have a lot of work to do on attracting and engaging more people. Moving forward, this really should become our focus. Please send us your feedback on the dashboard. Let us know if you have questions and add your email address when you log in if you'd like us to contact you when we have dashboard updates for your organization. Thanks for visiting with us.